I want to have a look at a story with you, because the thing about finance as well is kind of all departments run through it, right? So whether it's health or whatever, finance, the finance minister, and finance has to be a part of it all. We said we'd have a look at this. I'd be happy to get your thoughts on it as well. It is the decision, what's it called? Scrutiny Week. Now I hadn't heard of this before. Is that something that National put in, or is it a normal thing? I hadn't heard of it before.
Brand new. It is actually the Standing Orders Committee. So once a term, the Standing Order Committee looks at all the standing orders and makes recommendations. One of the recommendations from last year was to have a full week of scrutiny. So it's a parliamentary type sitting week. Everybody's got to be on site. And then basically similar to the Australians, which is just basically it's scrutinising ministers. So we have them for longer. We have more chance to question them and officials.
All right. Interesting. I think it's a really good idea, just quietly. I'm sure the ministers hate it from whatever side they're on. If you guys get back in at some stage, I'm sure you'll hate it as well. Let's have a look at this story, because we're all talking about this broken promise of the 13 cancer drugs, but there is a new layer to this now, which is some of the cancer drugs that National promised to fund. I'm not saying they're obsolete, but there are now better versions or better drugs that would replace those ones. But this government is refusing now to say you will get a drug. It may not be the name drug because there may be better ones out. They're still sticking by, it would appear, the drugs that they named last year, even though some of them, I'm exaggerating a bit when I say are not fit for purpose, but there are other ones which may be better fit for purpose. It's a bizarre thing to hold on to, but yeah, Dr. Shane Reti seems to be holding on to it pretty staunchly, maybe for no other reason other than to say, well, we kept our promise. I don't know. Let's have a look at the story.
Health Minister Shane Reti is sticking to his guns about funding the specific 13 cancer drugs promised on the election campaign.
Specific 13.
Despite an author of the report the promise was based on saying the list is out of date.
The broken cancer drugs promise was front and centre of a grilling at Select Committee today. Political editor Jenna Lynch has the story.
This is the anatomy of a broken promise.
We do acknowledge that we could have communicated this better.
National promised to fund 13 cancer drugs on the election campaign and failed to deliver them in the budget. It's become a disaster for the government. Did you put in a formal budget bid for those cancer drugs?
Yes.
And why was it declined?
Oh, that's confidential.
Some problems with the policy include Pharmac's supposed to remain independent from government, so drug selection's not influenced by politicians. Introducing 13 cancer treatments all at one time comes with major extra workforce demands, cost, and while Pharmac has signed off on 7 of the drugs, one's been declined, 3 still require assessment or clinical advice. No application has been lodged for the other 2.
Yet you persisted with this manipulative and cruel promise you did not intend to follow through on.
I think the word cruel, I mean, we've talked about the meanness from this government, but I think cruel around this, we've heard from people, and I'm sure you have too, Barbara, who voted for this government, who got friends and family to vote for this government so they could get these drugs. And I can't wait. We try and get people from the coalition to come on about once a month. They never say yes. So I just always say this because I know the media sometimes watches us, is I can't wait for someone to ask if there's been any research to the number of people that will die of cancer in the space it's taking them for these guys to sort this out. Because there will be people that this delay causes them to lose their life earlier. No one's asking that question yet, but it is cruel, it is mean, and it's the worst kind of promise, literally throwing a crumb that might give someone a longer life or might help them fight something off and then going, nah, landlords, tax cuts, more important. You're welcome to comment on that now, either of you, before I push play.
No, roll on.
Okay, keep going.
Ministers are scrambling to find a workaround, but in public, Shane Reti is doubling down, recommitting to the specific 13 drugs he promised.
Are you committed to delivering on the specific 13 medicines that you promised in your election pledge?
We are committed to delivering the cancer treatments as we described them. Correct.
The list came from the Cancer Control Agency report, written back in 2021. Dr. Chris Jackson helped write the report, and he says it was never designed as a shopping list.
Picking a 3-year-old list is just nuts.
Cancer treatments have since evolved. There are more effective drugs available, but even knowing that, Reti's sticking to the specific 13.
That's the commitment that we made, and so that's what we're sticking to.
So what's better for patients, for you to win a political promise or for them to get the best treatment?
Good question.
For those who saw themselves in our policy, we want to give them hope, and we want to meet those commitments.
He's prioritising saving his skin politically over doing what's right for patients.
If it were me, I would have said we promise everyone who had a condition on that list that they will get a drug. We will make sure it's the best one.
News Hub understands that behind the scenes in the Beehive there is some confusion and frustration with the way that Dr Reti has handled this, including that recommitment to the specific 13 drugs today, with one source telling me it is near impossible to fulfil that promise. We understand that a fix for this could be announced as soon as next week. Jenna Lynch, News Hub.
There you go. Now, I know this is the health syllabus or the health thing, but Barbara, you've been in those meetings, you've been in those finance committees and stuff. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so we had Nicola Willis today at the Finance Expenditure Committee, and that was the very first question I asked her, because budgets are about choices, right? They made a choice as well during the election campaign to campaign on delivering those 13 drugs. Like what Aisha said, it's probably it's the cruelest and most manipulative broken promise that they've given.
Yeah.
But the major thing is, for me, and I said this on the very first day I took over from the finance role, all roads lead to Nicola. She is the finance minister. She is ultimately the person that takes the paper to cabinet to get it signed off. So first of all, Shane Reti clearly didn't do the policy work before or during the election around that promise. He is a doctor. He was in debates with Aisha Verrill when Aisha Verrill said, you can't choose the drugs for Pharmac. Pharmac is independent so that politicians don't play politics with drug cancer or with drugs. You know, what's to say, Pat, that, you know, why is my mum's cancer drugs more important than your dad's cancer drugs? Politicians should not play God.
Yeah.
So he didn't do the work there. They clearly used an outdated list. But then what's worse is even if the policy itself is difficult, there is nothing in the budget as a tagged contingency or basically a pre-commitment to a future budget for these cancer drugs.
Yep.
And that's what I got out of Nicola today. Well, actually, no, didn't get much out of Nicola today. She said that the policy is being worked through the framework. The policy is pretty simple. You said 13 cancer drugs, and you've clearly said it's going to go through Pharmac. But actually, on News Hub tonight, and you know, News Hub's only going to be around for a couple more weeks, which is quite stink because they're doing a really great job. David Seymour has now come. So Reti says we're going to fund those 13 drugs. Nicola Willis said initially some, but then she corrected and said, you know, she means all of them. But then David Seymour has basically said this is not a government policy per se. And then so his question was around, you know, he does the right thing around the Pharmac stuff because he's the Minister for Pharmac. So there is a huge amount of chaos that's happening clearly in the back room around this. But actually, it comes down to it. If Nicola Willis was really going to fund them, she should have had something in the budget to signal they were going to be funded, but she hasn't.
Yeah, and it's obviously putting them in the arse pretty badly. They weren't aware of the kickback they were going to get. Hey, before we shoot off, I've got a question for you. It's to do with finance in particular. Fiscal cliffs. We keep getting told about fiscal cliffs. The way I understand it, the way we understand it is the previous government funded whatever it was to finish on the 28th of February. And that when it was up for being refunded, like funded again or not, this government seems to be telling us that you guys messed up by not leaving enough money in the kitty to pay for the next lot of whatever the thing you're funding. Have I got that right, or can you explain what it is?
Yeah, so it's actually called time-limited funding. And so it's when there is funding that's set aside, but it's not for the full forecast period. It's not baselined. So for Pharmac, traditionally it's sort of time limited for 2 years.
Yeah.
The National Party can't say that they didn't know anything because they basically copied the numbers we had in our fiscal plan, which was to maintain, you know, Pharmac funding. So they can't say that. So it's time limited funding. She's called it a fiscal cliff. The other day she called it a fiscal bomb. Well, she's got 7 fiscal bombs in her budget, including time-limited funding for police operations of 120 million. So it's time-limited funding is sometimes used where there are particular initiatives that are dependent on other things. So, for example, Pharmac, if there's different drugs or there's more drugs that's going to be funded, then the government will put more money into it. But actually, it's a very common mechanism that's used under the Public Finance Act for budgets for particular initiatives. And she's basically just got egg on her face because she's got 7 of them in her own budget. But apparently, David Seymour said, it's not a fiscal cliff when it's our budget.
Yeah, pretty much. Hey, Chewie, sorry, I just realised I just moved away from that topic to do with the health thing and jumped in ahead here. Do you want to say anything, speak to that at all?
Not specific. Like I've probably got more a finance question as well.
Go.
One of the things that we see here in the chat, and I've seen it a little bit tonight as well, is when it comes to contesting the next election, one of the things that a lot of our chat felt let down on was things like capital gains tax and ruling out things more than saying what you were going to do. In your opinion, as much as you can say, is there a lesson that Labor has learned from the last election?
Sorry, Troy, you're kind of breaking up for me. Pat, what was the question?
Round. I wasn't really listening. I never listened to Chewie. No, I'm just kidding. Talking about, has Labor learned a lesson from ruling things out like capital gains tax rather than thinking about what to put in, what to rule in? Is that a fair assertion, Chewie? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
I haven't really given much thought to it, to be honest. Like, that's obviously a political strategy that that lots of politicians of different stripes have used. There's really something for Chippy to kind of talk about whether we've learnt from that lesson. I think, though, it's pretty clear from our members and our supporters that they wanted more from us last election. So, that's why we've basically said we've got a blank sheet of paper now.
Yeah, so we could see a radically different approach to the next election than we saw to the last, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I think you will. And the other thing is like, whatever our policy is we've learnt, what the Nats did really well last election was they actually campaigned for a lot longer than just the 6-week period. We were in government. Yeah. We had a lot on, especially because we had cyclone recovery as well that we were dealing with last year. Yeah. So what the Nats did is they held public meetings up and down the country on different things, because that's the thing you have with opposition. You have time. You have the ability to get out there. So that's definitely something that we have taken on board, in the sense that when we come out with our policy, we need to basically test it and talk to people and get people on board with it.
Yeah, you could do electioneering for the next 2 years. That's an idea. I mean, heard that somewhere before. Yeah. You could just get into it. Hey, have you got a few minutes? We'll just chuck a couple of these questions at you from the punters.
Yeah, go for it.
This one's more of a comment from Jezza. Barbara, when Willis wants to liken the budget to a household, you need to sow the seed that your family with 8 kids makes you more qualified. Barbara, just a little inside thing. Barbara just told us before we got on that she's gone back to the office because she can't do this at home because there's too many kids around, which I think is great. From Frosty. Frosty says, if you were to get in, this is a question to us. Aotearoa getting a primary school. Aotea.
No, Aotea is a suburb in our electorate.
Okay, so if you were to get in, Barbara, but I got confused because you are in. So just what is the likelihood of Aotea getting a primary school?
Yeah, so that's something that's actually really tricky. Like, there is a huge demand in Aotea for a primary school, but there's also other primary schools in the surrounding areas. Been working with the ministry, actually before I got into opposition, around what their plans for that, and they were doing a network review around it. But definitely get in touch with me, Frosty, so we can keep you informed of how we go.
Frosty is a school student himself. He hangs around and he's a good egg. Here's one. Barbara for PM, would you consider running for leadership, Barbara?
I've ruled that out for the reason that I've got 8 kids and they deserve their privacy. My kids are at that phase. I don't share pictures of them on social media. I don't know if you've noticed that on my MP page. If I do share a photo, it might be from behind.
Yep.
But they're their own little individuals, and it's already a lot of pressure on them that their mum's not around for them. So, and I know the scrutiny that comes with media, for me, it's just not in my heart, unfortunately.
Yeah, maybe one more. Josh says here, Labor's progressive tax reform plan. What is it?
Josh, I hope you're a member of the Labor Party, and if you aren't, join us so that you can be part of us developing that progressive tax reform plan. We haven't yet finalised it. We're still going through our conferences that we have as a party, and then we've got an annual conference in November where those remits and those policy decisions from our members comes through. So there's a good plug for you, Josh. Join the Labor Party.
From the coalition, this is a question from me, and I didn't pay a super chat for it, but I'm going to put it to the front. From the opposition, who's your closest mate? Do you have a good mate or a friend or someone you get on with well from the coalition?
Oh yeah, well, so from the coalition itself.
Yeah, from the coalition, from the other side of the political world. Is there a mate that you've got over there that you like are good friends with or anything?
I've got lots of mates, if you could say that, and it seems to be I'm their favourite. Apparently, probably not Nicola's favourite anymore. A couple of people actually that I have spent a bit of time with is Rima Nakul, who is the MP for Takanini, because I did a looking towards 2040 lecture up in Takanini, and so I got to know Rima really well. But the other one is Jenny Marcroft, who's in New Zealand First. And that relationship with Jenny goes, back from the 2017 days when when I was working as a staffer for that coalition government with New Zealand First. So, got plenty of mates, but I love my own team better.
Got any? What about the opposite? Like I remember interviewing Helen Clark when Dom Brash became the leader of National. And I went to her, I'm paraphrasing, but isn't it a bit weird that you're now going up against the guy who was just your Reserve Bank governor? Does that feel a bit weird? And she was like, yep, it's really weird. Is there any, from your previous relationships with people who are now sort of in the opposing side, is there anything that's a bit weird out there? Relationships or friendships or acknowledgements that like this, I was really surprised this person went there or anything like that?
No, not really, because I worked under Winston and Shane Jones. I worked for Judith Collins and for Michael Woodhouse when I was a public sector private secretary in their offices. Mm-hmm. It's one of those things you learn a bit of a mutual respect when you work for or with people. You kind of learn basically what makes them tick. So I'm going to be, and I'm quite respectful of that. If anything, probably. I've worked for Stuart Nash as well, my good mate Nashy. You see lots of stuff and you just basically roll with it. But for me, it's I'm not in this job for the power or the ambition, and I do like people. So unless they do some really, really bad stuff, then, I'm not going to judge you that much, because as long as you're in there for the same intentions, for the right reasons, then you be you and I'll be me, and I'll still debate you, but we can have that on the topic as opposed to the actual what you like personally.
And I think finally, Chewy, we just need to do this because we need to get a thumbnail. And so we'll get this thumbnail, we'll get it live, we'll say hi, and then we'll get a thumbnail out of the image. And it's super simple. There you go. See that, Chewy? That's how professional we are. We just do our thumbnails.
Smooth.
Yeah,
Silky smooth.
No one saw that. Hey, thanks for coming on, Barbara. It's been a blast, man. It's we've been talking about getting you on for a while, and it's been a lot of fun. Anything else you want to add, Chewy?
No, I think I've covered the big questions. It's been great having you on. We love having the playmakers come on and actually explain a lot of the stuff to us.
Yeah, because we don't know anything.
And actually spending the time, because it doesn't happen on the news networks. You don't get enough time to actually discuss these things.
Yep, very cool. And I was just thinking that is Labor going to do something with the title C-lister? I think that should be another way to move forward. Now, maybe T-shirts we should get out. You know how like what did Hillary Clinton call voters? The undesirables or whatever it was, and then they all took that label on. I think we should start up another T-shirt Chewy with C-lister on it or something like that. Would work well. Hey, Barbara, thanks for jumping.
Both ways, right? C-lister and also cancer lister. So
Yikes. All right, man. Hey, look, thanks so much for joining us tonight. It's been really fun. Appreciate you giving up some time. And I don't know whether we appreciate more giving you some time or you appreciate more getting a half hour of quiet time with us. I don't know which is more powerful, but either way, thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Cheers, man.